The advantage would be definitely in comparison to those states that didn't then lower the tax rate or tax burden in some other area. And again, I think the Tennessee General Assembly would do that. I think the devil's in the details, but I don't want us to, as a General Assembly, to get kind of starry-eyed about the opportunity to fund another project or start another program or something like that. I mean, or like to expand, use this to in some way to as a method to expand Medicaid or something like that, or TennCare or something like that.
Did you not pass 2 tax cuts this year?
Yes. We did.
Are we not going to have a surplus at the end of the year that we can put some money back in the rainy day fund?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've got over, $300 million this year.
If the lawmakers didn't think they had enough revenue to spend this year, would you have passed a tax cut and put some more in the rainy day fund? Or wouldn't you have at least spent all the money that you had to spend?
Ralph, I agree with what you're saying. You're saying surely you guys would continue down the road.
Surely a strong Republican government, state after state after state, surely they understand the political landmine they'd be stepping on if they used this as an opportunity to increase taxes.
I agree, and I'm saying yes, you're probably right. But I've learned not to take anything for granted. I'm certainly not going to make a prediction. I am saying this: that the bill that if this passes Congress, and it still has to pass the House in Washington, but if this comes to Tennessee and we have the option of doing this, and the governor and the leadership determine that this is in the best interest of Tennessee, I want to know what taxes they're going to remove or take down. That's what I want to know, because the devil's in those details. And so while I would be more inclined to it, I'm not going to commit to it.
I'm certainly satisfied with the commitment they will use it to lower taxes and let you guys find it out in the legislature which taxes ought to be lowered. I think that's something that ought to be a deliberative process, and it ought to be decision number 2, not decision number 1.
Right. And I just don't want to use that as a ruse to fund a project for the sake of doing something else that has nothing to do directly with
We have to break, and we'll be back with Joe on the other side.
From the Hiller Studios, you're listening to Ralph Bristol on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Heritage is the only organization that has done an analysis of the cost.
Senator, with all due respect, if the Republican Party wants to stay relevant, they've got to be moderate on immigration.
We just want Congress for once to count the cost of a bill.
Senator Jim DeMint and Bill Richardson arguing about the immigration bill, and Representative Joe Carr is in our studio. We'll let him comment on the commentary. We'll play the full sound bites and let Joe play me commenting on the commentary in just a little bit. I want to wrap up our discussion with Joe about the internet sales tax. You are giving due consideration to the problems that are passed on to you from businesses with the potential. Hit your red button there because Tommy didn't. The regulation, the collection of the tax, the audits, and that sort of thing.
Right.
You think that's
I just want to be careful.
strong.
I just want to be careful, real careful, that we don't do anything to small businesses that hurts them, because for them to compete like the national chains, which is, we want everybody to have the same access to the same marketplace, that the requirements for a piece of software that would determine what these different disparate tax codes would be in different municipalities in different states isn't so prohibitive that it restricts where they can participate. I think we can resolve that issue, but I don't want to assume that we can just because we can do things through software now. Having a background in that, I know it can be kind of expensive. So I want to be sensitive to small businesses in that regard.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about this another time, I'm
Sounds
sure.
great.
Let's move on to, we're going to play, Joe's going to play Ralph here, and we're going to go to the tape, and we're going to listen to the debate on I think it was ABC's This Week about the immigration bill. Now, as you probably know, the Heritage Foundation released its study, I believe on Monday, saying that the cost of illegal amnesty for illegals is going to be $6.3 trillion. DeMint says no one other than Heritage has scored the cost past 10 years.
Well, CBO said Obamacare wouldn't cost us anything. They're basically puppets of the Congress and the assumptions that they put in the bill. Heritage is the only organization that has done an analysis of the cost. Unlawful immigrants make up about 2% of our GDP. And they consume most of that. And if you consider all the factors of amnesty and unlawful immigration, the cost will be in the trillions of dollars over the lifetime of these unlawful immigrants.
Well,
Is that the strongest argument against this bill?
That is one of 3 or 4 very, very strong arguments for the bill, I think, or against the bill, excuse me, because I'm adamantly opposed to this bill. What we've got is we've got Democrats and Republicans trying to pander to a particular demographic group. This didn't come up as this strong of an issue until after the election. I read a report recently, Ralph, that said that that when Romney lost the Hispanic vote by a 30 to 70% margin, in other words, he got 30% of the Hispanic vote, that if that had been flipped, that if he had gotten 70% of the Hispanic vote, that he still would have lost the election. So if Republicans' goal here is to be more attractive to the Hispanic community so that they can be more competitive in presidential elections, I think they're misguided. But what we've got is a problem. If we don't have a problem with immigration, yeah, we could probably do better on our immigration laws to make it more efficient. But what we've got is 11, 12 million people here who are here illegally. 40% of those people overstay their visas. A lot of those are what they call F1 or student visas. They get here, they stay here, they drop out of school, they don't finish school or whatever, and then they don't return back to their country of origin. So there's no enforcement of the existing immigration laws, or very, very little. Then we've got 60% who come across our border. So we have a very lax border. And despite what Homeland Security is saying, the problem of illegal immigration is going up again, not going down. So I think what we need to do is we need to try to enforce the law before we determine or ascertain that the laws or the immigration laws are ineffective.
Let's listen to Bill Richardson, former New Mexico governor, former Commerce Secretary, former U.S. ambassador, former Congress. He is very plugged into the Democrat Party. He thinks he says opposition to the immigration bill will make Republicans irrelevant.
I think, Senator, with all due respect, if the Republican Party wants to stay relevant in the Electoral College with Hispanic voters, they've got to be moderate on immigration. And I think what is happening today is the Senate has started out with a realistic bill. Although I'm, as a Hispanic, my beef right now is the path to citizenship. I think it's 13 years. Right. It's excessive.
You go to Congress opposing this, and you're going to be irrelevant, Joe.
Well, I think what's very interesting and telling is that a partisan liberal Democrat governor, Bill Richardson, is advising the Republicans about how to stay relevant. If Lucy and Charlie Brown, it would be the Republicans in this case, the football would be illegal immigration and amnesty, and of course Lucy's the Democrats, and we know how that turns out. Lucy snatches the ball away again, and we end up flat on our backs. I think if any Republican or any serious, loving patriot of this United States takes Bill Richardson seriously, that he has the Republicans' interests at heart, they're fooling themselves.
We'll come back with more comments from Jim DeMint and comments on the comments from Representative Joe Carr here on Nashville Morning News. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
7:50 Nashville Morning News. I'm going to move on. We have some other sound bites on the immigration that I was going to play for Joe and have him comment on them, but I'm going to move on because we haven't gotten to some other things yet, and our time is limited. He'll be back on a regular basis, so we'll be able to talk about all of these things. But Obamacare, all Republicans are against Obamacare, but the question is, what do you do about it? There are fights on a regular basis about this vote or that, whether it's going to help or hurt Obamacare. Well, how do you go into Congress and say, okay, I'm going to be part of the solution to extracting this problem from the people of the United States?
Well, it is such a millstone around the neck of the American people and this country. I mean, here we are fighting a debt of $16.8 trillion, and it's going up. We've got a deficit of over $1 trillion. And now we've strapped the American taxpayer and businesses with this Affordable Care Act that is nothing more than a millstone, and it's going to drown small businesses. It's going to take them to the bottom. And now we're talking about amnesty for illegals, which is going to add another $6.3 trillion and burden the healthcare system even more. Ralph, I almost get the impression that the Obama administration believes that if they can't have a crisis by which they can take advantage of, as the chief of staff notably said, they can create these crises. So I'm leery. And I'm not just leery, but if we can't repeal it, and it doesn't look like we will be able to repeal it, then we need to do everything to defund it or put put obstacles in the way to ensure that it doesn't get implemented, because it's going to be a disaster for this country. It already is, and it's going to get worse.
The president says the only reason it's not working the way it's supposed to is because all of these Republican obstacles. If you guys would just get out of the way and stay out of the way and fund it fully the way that he wants it, it would work just fine. And that is the line that you're going to have to answer.
Well, that's such an ignorant statement coming from the president, because Nancy Pelosi, who was Speaker of the House at the time, said we've got to pass the bill to find out what's in the bill. And we still don't know what's in the bill. I mean, that's the most ridiculous statement. It shows you just how disingenuous and out of touch he is with his own legislation. Let's not forget that this bill passed on a strictly partisan basis. Not one Republican voted for this bill, and that is abhorrent.
We know enough about what's in the bill that Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming, also a medical doctor, said this bill is the main impediment to job creation in the United States, because businesses are taking part-timers and making them part-timers with fewer hours. They're taking full-timers, making them part-timers, and they're shrinking their businesses down to below 50 people if they can to avoid the effects of Obamacare. And it is the main drag on job growth in the country. Do you think that's probably true?
I don't think it's probably true. I know it's true, because what they're going to do is when you get under 50 employees, they're going to drive that health care cost back to the American taxpayer. Moreover, it's driving doctors and nurses out of the health care profession. It's putting hospitals financially at risk. There's nothing about the Affordable Care Act that's either affordable or caring. And if we can't repeal it, we need to defund it. And we need to put obstacles in the way to ensure it never is fully implemented or enacted.
And we've only got 1 minute left. How do you get spending under control? What's the pressure point where we can get spending under control? More than it is.
The first thing we've got to do is we got an artery that we've got a hole in, and we got to stop the bleeding. We got to cauterize that artery, and that's Obamacare. And we got to stop the implementation of this amnesty for illegals. We've got to stop this mindset that says we can spend our way into prosperity. I'm talking about government spending. We need a more efficient, smaller federal government that shifts the burden of responsibilities back to the states, because the states are better equipped to solve these problems anyway.
State Representative Joe Carr, who was my weekly State House reporter this year during the legislative session. The session is over, so you've got more time now to run for Congress, and I assume that's going to take up quite a bit of your time between now and then.
It's going to take up a substantial amount of my time. I wish I had more time to spend on policy and debate. Unfortunately, I've talked about that off air, but we're going to be a policy-driven, principle-driven campaign.
Come back again soon.
Can I say one thing?
We'll have you on a regular basis. It's got to be very quick.
JoeCarrForCongress.com is the website. Please visit. Thank you.
JoeCarrForCongress.com. Thank you, Joe.